I think that serious miscarriage of justice is one of the worst things that can happen to a person. That is to be accused of a crime that you didn't commit and then serve a extensive period behind bars. And it's actually one reason why I'm uneasy about the death penalty because there's no going back if you execute the wrong person. You can't you can posthumously reprieve them, but there's no going back. With long-term custody, it's still devastating, but at least there's some chance of the person rebuilding their life. I think it's a terrible thing. I think it's as bad as crime itself. Um, and I'm coming from a point where I've always been conservative on crime. I think people who are guilty of serious crimes have to face consequences. But anyway, I want to address a case that's got a bit of attention recently. I'm going to look at two articles. Going to read them out. I don't know if I'll read the whole thing yet, depending how long they are, but I think this is an eye opener and it's far from unique, particularly in the American justice system. So, without further ado, I'll just get into it, and then, if you bear with me, I'll give a bit of commentary afterwards. Okay, so this is from E, host E. I'm not familiar with that source, but anyway, the report's by Corinne Hiller. Man accused of raping Lovely Bones author Alice Sebold has conviction overturned. Anthony Broadwater served 16 years in prison after being accused of raping author Alice Sebold. More than 20 years after he completed his sentence, his conviction was overturned. Um, a judge has overturned the conviction of Anthony Broadwater, who served 16 years in prison after being wrongfully accused of the 1981 rape of the Lovely Bones author Alice Sebold. New York State Supreme Court Justice Gordon Cuffey exonerated him on Monday, November the 22nd, at the courthouse in the city of Syracuse, and also vacated other counts related to the case. Sebold has not commented. Now that's been updated. She actually has, so I'll focus on that report afterwards. Broadwater, who was released from prison in 1999, broke down sobbing after the ruling was made. I never ever thought that I would see the day that I would be exonerated, the 61-year-old said after the court hearing, the Syracuse Post-Standard reported. He also said, I did everything I could to always show people that I'm never that type of guy. I never could be that type of guy. The judge agreed to overturn Broadwater's conviction after the prosecutor sided with two defense lawyers who had asked for the dismissal based on flaws in the 1982 rape trial, the newspaper reported. District Attorney William Fitzpatrick said in the courtroom, I won't sully these proceedings by saying I'm sorry. That doesn't cut it. This should never have happened. When the DA spoke to me, his words were so profound, so strong, it shook me. Broadwater told CNN on Wednesday, November the 24th, it made me cry with joy and happiness because a man of this magnitude would say what he said on my behalf. It's beyond what I could say myself. Siebold, whose 2002 book The Lovely Bones inspired a 2009 movie of the same name, had written in her 1999 memoir, Lucky, about her sexual assault. She wrote that a stranger beat and raped her in a tunnel in Thorndon Park near Syracuse University when he was a freshman there. Months later, she saw on the street in the city a man who reminded her of her rapist, and she reported the encounter to police. She later wrote about how she failed to identify the authority suspect for her rape in a police lineup, but prosecutors later used her account and a microscopic hair analysis, which 35 years later was deemed faulty, as evidence, and Broadwater, then 20, was charged with forcible rape. Siebold testified at his trial. I just hope and pray that maybe Miss Siebold will come forward and say, hey, I made a grave mistake and give an apology, he told the New York Times. I sympathise with her, but she was wrong. No, she actually has, so I'm going to go to that in a second. Because a few days ago there was criticism, like why is she silent? Why is she not saying anything? And people were very critical of her. I'll come back to that because I think it's a notable point in this case. Broadwater consistently maintained he was innocent. Before completing his prison sentence, he was denied parole at least 5 times because he wouldn't admit to a crime he didn't commit, according to his attorneys, and also passed two lie detector tests. CNN reported. In 2019, it was reported that Lucky would be adapted into a movie. Earlier this year, executive producer Timothy, I think that's Mukiante, noticed discrepancies between the memoir and the script. He told the New York Times, I started having some doubts, not about the story that Alice told about her assault, which was tragic, but the second part of her book about the trial, which didn't hang together. Okianse, who has since left the production, that's understandable. I mean, why would you go ahead with production if the basis for it is faulty? Hired a private investigator to examine the evidence against Broadwater and help bring it to a lawyer who Broadwater ended up hiring for his defense team and who helped led to his conviction being overturned. On Thursday, November the 22nd, days after Broadwater was exonerated, Variety reported that the Lucky film was dropped after losing its financing months ago. On New Year's Day 1999, 8 months before Siebold's memoir was published, Broadwater, then 38, was released from prison about 16 years behind bars. Now, with his conviction overturned, Broadwater will be removed from the sex offender registry to which he was added following his sentence. His status on the list and his criminal record made it hard for him to make a living. A lot of doors have been slammed in my face for jobs, he told reporters outside the court. Broadwater told CNN, I did what I could do, and that was just, creating work for myself, doing landscaping, tree removal, hauling, clean cuts. In 1999, after his release from prison, Broadwater started seeing his now wife Elizabeth. She wanted children. I wouldn't bring children in the world because of this, Broadwater told reporters in court. And now we're past the age we can't have children. So clearly this affected his whole life. He told the Syracuse Post Standard that Elizabeth believed in him, adding, I told her I'd never stop fighting this case. Clearly a loyal, decent wife. Um, so it's only fair to read out a bit of the other report, the update on this. This is from yesterday. Alice Sebold apologizes to man cleared of her rape. American author Alice Sebold has apologized for her part in the wrongful conviction of a man who was cleared last week of raping her in 1981. In a memoir, Lucky, that's already been covered. A statement from Mr. Broadwater released via his lawyer said he was relieved that she has apologized. In Miss Sebold's apology statement, that's Miss MS, she said, I'm sorry most of all for the fact that the life you could have led was unjustly robbed from you, and I know that no apology can change what happened to you and never will. Lucky sold more than 1 million copies and launched Miss Sebold's career as an author. She went on to write the novel The Lovely Bones, which was turned into an Oscar nominated film by Peter Jackson. Um, and then it just goes on to read what I've already written. Well, actually, I'll just follow up a little bit. Mr. Mukiansi, that's the producer, said it was impossible for him to lay any blame at the 18-year-old Alice Sebold for the wrongful conviction. I read Alice's apology, and Anthony was very gracious in accepting that apology, and I really applaud him for that. That's the kind of person he is, he said. Upon hearing the news that it had been cleared of the crime, Mr. Broadwater, um, 61, told AP News Agency that he was crying with tears of joy and relief. Um, Miss Seabold said in her statement that she'd spent the last 8 days trying to comprehend why this could have happened. I will grapple with the fact that my rapist will, in all likelihood, never be known, may have gone on to rape other women, and certainly will never serve the time in prison that Mr. Broadwater did, she added. Okay, so there's a number of things to say around this case. Firstly, being falsely accused of the crime of rape is probably every man's worst nightmare, particularly as a man. I think it's something that's horrendous because inside it's one of those crimes, a bit like any sort of crimes against children, where you're also at risk from other inmates. It's a very sensitive crime, raping a woman. Um, it's different, like if you assault another man or you're involved in that sort of case. This sort of sex crime, it's particularly sensitive. Um, I would caution people a little bit about jumping to conclusions about Alice Sebold and saying she's a false accuser or calling her a liar or something like this, because from what from the information that's available, what you had here was a traumatized young woman who didn't maliciously blame an innocent man, but made a severe mistake. Now, when she identified him, it seems that she felt that he was her rapist. I don't think this is a case of a false accusation in the sense of just maliciously blaming an innocent man because maybe you've had some argument with him. I mean, there's been cases, for example, in this country, of women who have lied and they've been exposed because they've made accusations against several men, and each man gave the same testimony, hence making her evidence fall apart or her claims fall apart. Or you get cases of women who are vindictive. Maybe they're angry with a former boyfriend, or they've had an argument with a man and they're just vindictive and they want to destroy his life by claiming rape. Um, Rape, I think, is one of the hardest crimes to process because often it's a case of his word against hers or her word against his. It's a terrible crime. Um, but I do think it's more complex than, for example, someone being assaulted with a blunt object. Um, Especially in cases of, for example, both people are drunk and the woman accuses a man of rape. It's a very difficult thing. But I do think this case is a little bit different than a woman who's been malicious and made a false accusation. Um, I do think, though, that she is a wealthy woman. She has made she's made her success through these books. I've watched the film The Lovely Bones. It's a very powerful film with Saoirse Ronan and Stanley Tucci and Mark Wahlberg. It's a very powerful film. I haven't read the book, although I do have it. Will I look at that in a different light now? I'm not sure because I don't know if the character of Alice Sebold should necessarily be vilified. Some people are sort of saying she's a liar, she's a false accuser. I think this is a little bit more complex than that. I think a lot of this may be to do with perhaps police corruption at the time, perhaps the fact that the proceedings were flawed because evidence wasn't considered that should have been. For example, that hair. I mean, it's scary to think this was the 1980s. We're not talking way back in the 40s or the 50s. This was the 1980s. And it does make you wonder how many innocent men, perhaps some women too, have been incarcerated for crimes they did not commit because of flawed evidence. It's quite scary. I mean, when you consider how many people are in prison in the United States, it's the world's biggest prison population. It's very, very, very plausible that among it's over I think it's about, well, close to 2 million people, unless I'm mistaken. Okay. Among that sort of population, it's almost certain that there will be innocent people. And I think there's obviously very serious flaws in the American system. And I think it would be um, wrong to say that it doesn't adversely affect black men. That's not to say that there aren't innocent white people who are also caught up in the system, but I do think that there is a problem with the system being stacked against black men on some level. It's probably improved somewhat, but I don't think anyone could say there isn't an issue there. Um, I mean, it's incredible how gracious this man is being. His whole life's been ruined, even though he's actually been free for 21 years. I mean, he's seen the whole 21st century, but his whole life's been affected. Any ambitions he would have had, he couldn't have done. I mean, it's fortunate they had such a loyal, understanding wife, and it's a testament to her that she stood by him. But there will be other men out there, and some women, like I say, who will also be innocent. I think at the very least, I mentioned Alice Sebold's a wealthy woman. At the very least, as a goodwill gesture, I think she should offer some of her wealth to him. You know, if nothing else, just to help him rebuild a little bit, maybe to get some sort of stability. The fact he's finally been cleared, he's 61, maybe he could get some sort of job. Um, I know there's something called the Innocence Project, which looks at people who are falsely accused or where there's cases that have serious question marks. Um, Now, this is not to say that every single case involving a black defendant they will be innocent. Of course not. But I do think there's flaws in the American system. no question about it. I also think in some states, particularly in really conservative states, there is punishments are pretty severe for some relatively minor crimes. And that's coming from me. I'm conservative on crime. I think actually, I was watching something last night just on the subject of the American justice system. The Larry Nassar case, the gymnastics coach who abused the girls in his supervision, and there was a dramatic scene in one courtroom where the father of one of the girls basically lashed out. This kind of went viral 3 years ago. Now he was restrained, and some lawyer was saying to the family members that you can't behave this way. I understand your feelings, but you can't behave this way. To the judge's credit, she didn't punish him. She said, you know, we have to have order in the court, but I totally understand it was a totally human reaction. And the father apologized. He said he lost his cool. It went viral, so it's not hard to find. But um, I do think there's serious problems in the American justice system. I think it was Indiana, under the governorship of Mike Pence, incidentally, where they had a law around rape that if a 17-year-old girl had sex with a 19-year-old man, he would be accused of rape, and he would be on the sex offenders register, even if she and her family, I believe there was an actual case where the girl and her family didn't want the guy to be punished because they didn't consider it to be what the state was saying, but he was on the sex offenders register for life. A 19-year-old young man with his 17-year-old girlfriend. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. In um, in Texas and in some of those other really conservative states, the penalties for minor drug offenses are severe. Um, so you know the United States, for all its talk about human rights, it really needs to look at its justice system. Um, because a case like this is an abomination. Now, I hope the state of New York is going to pay him a very hefty sum of money for the time that he lost, the 16 years he was incarcerated, but also the 20 years he struggled to find work. It would need to be calculated, but I think that's fair. Absolutely fair. It's not enough to just strike his name from the sex offenders register and exonerate him. They need to help him. You know, um, if he needs sort of help in getting back into the labour market. He's 61, so it probably wouldn't be for very long anyway. But the state has to do something more than just say, oh, well, sorry, we got it wrong. They need to look into other cases that might be similar, where perhaps a single piece of evidence was used to convict someone, and then it turns out to be flawed evidence. Um, But I will close just by saying that in this case, my gut feeling is Alice Sebold isn't a false accuser in the sense that she didn't maliciously try to destroy an innocent man. This was a traumatized young woman who wanted justice, understandably, and she genuinely thought that he looked like her attacker. It was a tragic mistake, and I'm sure she feels terrible guilt about it. She should give him some money, I think, as a goodwill gesture. Um, but you know, it also means that she hasn't got justice, and it's possible that her rapist is still at large. So, you know, people shouldn't vilify her, but she hasn't got justice either. I mean, this has been an injustice for Anthony Broadwater, but it also means that she therefore hasn't got justice. So they're both victims, actually. But as a man, I can't imagine a nightmare like that, what Anthony Broadwater's been through. And he is not the only guy in the American justice system that's been through this. I think any similar cases where a single piece of evidence was used, it needs to be reopened immediately because it might well, in fact, it's almost certain, given the numbers that are in the American prison system, it's almost certain that there will be innocent people incarcerated. And that's very disturbing to think about. I'm not saying we're perfect either. We've also had serious miscarriages of justice in the UK. The Stefan Kitchell case, for example, um, in the north of England in the 70s. So, you know, I'm not suggesting we're perfect. Every legal system in the world's probably had this. There was a man executed in Beijing in the 90s for rape, and the years later, the actual rapist was found, and the state gave his family some financial compensation. But because the death penalty had been used, no going back, this young man was executed for a crime he didn't commit. Um, so I think that justice systems need to get it right. I believe in justice. I'm conservative on crime. I think where there is solid evidence, people need to pay a price for what they've done, but the evidence must be solid. And it's a disgrace that he was denied parole because he pleaded innocence. Now, I don't know what sort of rationale that was, like he didn't show remorse, but there's a difference between not showing remorse and saying, I'm an innocent man. And, to keep that up, I think someone who was guilty wouldn't bother doing it because at some point they'd realize I'm here for what I done. It's not going to change. I think someone who's innocent, to have that energy to keep it up. The fact that was denied 5 times is an absolute disgrace. And the state of New York needs to look into how it assesses those cases. This can't be, oh, well, we got it wrong this time. Very sorry to Mr. Broadwater, but not learn from it would be very unfortunate. Let me know your thoughts.